Does anybody know what wiki means? It's short for what I know is. So strange, huh? It's interesting that the Prophet said, kufar, he said that the Dajjal would have kafara on his forehead and fahajja'ahu. In the hadith it says, he spelt them out. It's so fascinating. Because Arabs don't use acronyms. They don't use initials for things. But this is a civilization, it's all initials. They don't say Kentucky Fried Chicken, they say KFC, right? We should have Muslim healthy fast food. Why don't we do that? Why aren't Muslim entrepreneurs? Where are you guys? And you can build universities and things like that. What time is it? How much more time? 15 minutes? Okay. MashaAllah. All right. That's good. So the sixth occupation of the teacher, أن يقتصر بالمتعلم على قدر فهمه. Okay, so we did that. Isa alayhi salam said, and this is from the Injil, he quotes the Injil a lot. And لا تعلق الجوهر في أعناق الخنازير فإن الحكمة خير من الجوهر ومن كرهها فهو شر من الخنازير. So he says, don't throw, in the Gospel it says, don't throw the pearls to swine. So he said, don't put jewels around the necks of pigs, because wisdom is better than a pearl or a jewel, and the one that doesn't like it is worse than a pig. So don't give wisdom to people that don't want it. وَلِذَلِكَ قِيلَ كِلْ لِكُلِّ عَبْدٍ بِمِعْيَارِ عَقْلِهِ. Weigh people according to the standard of their intellect. وَزِنْ لَهُ بِمِزَانِ فَهْمِهِ حَتَّى تَسْلَمَ مِنْهُ وَيَنْتَفِعَ بِكَ. So that you're free from them and they can benefit from you. وَإِلَّا وَقَعَ الْإِنْكَارُ لِتَفَاوُتِ الْمِعْيَارِ. Otherwise, they're going to condemn you because they didn't understand that there's different standards. Some of the ulama were asked about something and they didn't ask. This is Imam Malik. And the man said, أَمَا سَمِعْتَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من كتم علما نافعا جاء يوم القيامة ملجما بلجام من النار. Haven't you seen that the one who withholds beneficial knowledge will come on the day of judgment and he's bridled with a bridle of fire? And he said, أُتْرُكَ اللِّجَامَ وَاذْهَبْ فَإِنْ جَاءَ مَنْ نَفَعَهُ وَكَتَمْتُهُ فَلْيُلْجِمْنَا. So he says, forget about this lijam and go. Because if the one who it would benefit him, وَكَتَمْتُهُ, and I hid it, then put the bridle on me. In other words, you're not capable of understanding. I'm not hiding the knowledge. It's just you're not worthy of that knowledge. So if the one who comes is worthy of it and I hide it, then put that bridle on me. Allah says, لا تؤتوا السفهاء أموالكم. Don't give fools your money. تنبيه على أن حفظ العلم ممن يفسده ويضره أولى. And money is more important than knowledge. So don't give fools knowledge either. And then the seventh is أن المتعلم القاصر ينبغي أن يلقى إليه الجلي اللائق به ولا يذكر له أن وراء هذا تدقيقا وهو يدخره عنه. That for a student who has a difficult time, don't give him clear things, but don't say, that there's more subtle aspects to this, but I can't really tell you. In other words, don't let them know you think they're stupid. Because هذا يفتر رغبته. This will wear him out. It'll exhaust him, make him lazy. He'll lose his himma. يشوش عليه قلبه, and it'll just cloudy his heart. ويهمل البخل به عنه, and then he'll think bad thoughts about you that you're just withholding from him, because he said every idiot thinks he's smart. So, and he said أضعفهم عقلا هو أفرحهم بكمال عقله. The people with the weakest intellects are often the people that think that they have the best ones. So is a problem. وبهذا يعلم أن من تقيد من العوام بقيد الشرع and then he says it's important that he don't go into with common people حقائق العلوم الدقيقة. Don't go into these subtle matters. Give them what they need to know. تعليم الأمانة في الصناعة. Teach them to be trustworthy in their craft or their art. So he's talking about vocational people, that simple people that aren't scholastic by nature. And the world, look, the world, Allah designed the world in a way that there's going to be garbage men. There's going to be welders. There's going to be auto mechanics. There's going to be, there has to be, and that's the hikmah of Allah. So, but everybody has their path to God. And the simplest person can be a wali of God and close to God. That's the beauty of this, is that you shouldn't belittle these people because they don't have intellect. That's intellectual pride. Because first of all, intellect is a gift from God. If God gave you a bigger portion than other people have, that's from Allah. And if you see it as from yourself, then you're a fool. So Robert Frost has a beautiful poem. If you should rise from somewhere, from nowhere up to somewhere, from being nobody up to being somebody, be sure to keep repeating to yourself, you owe it to an arbitrary God, whose mercy to you rather than to others won't bear too critical examination. Stay unassuming, if for lack of license to wear the uniform of who you are, you should be tempted to make up for it with a subordinating look or tone, right? So be careful. He's warning you about, if you have gifts or if you're put into positions of stature or power, be very careful, because it's that wheel of fortune. You're up there, and for whatever reasons, there's other people that are probably more worthy of you. But for whatever reasons, God put you there. Don't get deluded by it. Beware of coming too much to the surface and using for apparel what was meant to be the curtain of the inmost soul. Don't be shallow people, be deep people. So that's important. And he was somebody that learned this bitterly, because he was such a genius. He was just a brilliant man. And so he admits that he had that intellectual arrogance, but he overcame it. It's one of his greatness. And then he says, at Wadifa Thamina, the 8th one, is that أن يكون المعلم عاملا بعلمه. He should act according to his knowledge. Don't let his words be belied by his actions. He said, actions يدرك بالبصائر والعمل يدرك بالأبصار. Ilm is discerned by the inner eye, but action is discerned by the outer eye, so people can see it. They can see whether you're actually acting according to your knowledge. And so he says you should do that. And then he says, مثلا معلم المرشد من المستشهد مثل النقش من الطين والعود من الظل فكيف ينتقش الطين بما لا نقش فيه ومتى استوى الظل والعود أعوج. He said the likeness of a teacher and the student is like putting an imprint into clay, or the shadow that's cast from the stick. So how can the clay be impressed if there's nothing impacting it? وَمَتَى اسْتَوَى الظِّلُّ وَالْعُودُ أَعْوَجُ. And how can a shadow be straight if the stick is crooked? Right? وَلِذَلِكَ قِيلَ. And for that reason it's been said, لَا تَنْهَ عَنْ خُلُقٍ وَتَأْتِيَ مِثْلُهُ عَارٌ عَلَيْكِ إِذَا فَعَلْتَ عَظِيمُ. Don't forbid people to do something and you yourself do it. Shame on you. If you do that, it's an enormity. And Allah says, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do you command people to righteousness and you forget your own souls? وَلِذَلِكَ كَانَ وِزْرُ الْعَالَمِ فِي مَعَاصِيهِ أَكْبَرَ مِنْ وِزْرِ الْجَهْلِ. And for that reason, the sin of the scholar in his disobedience is greater than the sin of the ignorant one. إِذْ لَا يَزِلُّ بِزَلَّتِهِ عَالَمٌ كَثِيرٌ. Because when an ignorant person stumbles, the world doesn't stumble with him. because nobody follows him. But when the alim, the scholar stumbles, the world stumbles with him because a lot of people follow him. مَنْ سَنَّ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً فَعَلَيْهِ وِزْرُهَا. If you put forward a sunnah, a bad practice, then you have the sin of anybody that acts according to it. وَلِذَلِكَ قَالَ عَلِيٌّ قَسَمَ ظَهْرِي رَجُلَانِ. Two people have broken my back. عَالِمٌ مُتَهَتِّكٌ, a shameless scholar, وَجَاهِلٌ مُتَنَسِّكٌ, and a ignorant worshipper. فَالْجَاهِلْ يَغُرَّ النَّاسِ بِتَنَسُّكِهِ. The ignorant one deludes people because of his devotion, and the alim puts people off because of his foulness. Wallahu a'lam. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people are so alienated from religion because of the abuses that have occurred in religion. A lot of people just totally put off by religion because they're so sick of these hypocrites. You know, people that they're screaming about family values and then they're in some hotel room with a prostitute and things like that. These are the type of things that just happen on a regular basis in I'm going to just start this quickly and then actually why don't we just, because I can do, I'm actually going to finish inshallah. So we finished, that's 6 is the longest one, which is the dangers of knowledge, right? And he tells you how to identify bad scholars. Maybe I'll skip that one. Alhamdulillah. Any questions? You mentioned that knowledge should not be associated with a fee. Having worked many years in Islamic programming curricula where students are charged, how should we reconcile what Imam Al-Ghazali says? The best way to do it is to never, and this has been our practice, never turn away anybody from lack of money. That should be very clear, that if people cannot afford to pay, because there are expenses that go to things, rooms are rented, things, you know, there's materials made, all these things. You have to pay teachers now. So these are reality. This is definitely the ideal. What he's saying is the ideal. Historically, you know, you had patrons who were patrons of scholars, and so they would actually support the scholar. Imam Malik had patrons. So he didn't have to charge any money because there were people that were actually supporting his teaching. That traditionally was what happened. Now that's far less than it used to be. I mean, there's still people, alhamdulillah, that are patrons, but generally it's not like it used to be. So that's what I would say, is that people should never, and that should be made clear to people if they can't afford it. A gifting model is also good. That's what Sandala uses, a gifting model, where people gift, and if they can't, then, you know, they should get it. But you know, we're in a, especially those of us in the West where people do have discretionary income, they can afford to support programs. But if they can't, inner city people that really do struggle with things, they shouldn't have that difficulty, and there should definitely be programs. And there should be materials provided for those peoples. How can we protect our intentions from being polluted by the love of position and ostentation? Well, yeah, that's a difficult one. It's something you have to struggle with in yourself. The nafs inclines towards those. Hubb riyasa, according to the ulama, and we'll do that when we get to وَعْلَمَ أَنَّ رَأْسَ الْأَفَاتِ واعلم أن رأس هذه الآفات حب الرياسة وطرح الآتي. You know, the foundation of all these diseases of the heart is love of leadership, love of position, love of stature, and procrastination. That's what Ibn Ashur says. And they say that in the books of the Qawm, they say the last thing to leave the hearts of sincere people is love of leadership, because it's that love of leadership that drives the person. If they have that kind of drive, they want to be outstrippers. So Allah put that in people for a reason, but you have to work on it and purify it. But it's there for a reason. If it wasn't there, there wouldn't be vying. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسَ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Munafasa is part of the human nature. Sayyidina Omar always tried to outdo Abu Bakr. At a certain point, he finally gave up. You know, when he brought half his wealth, Abu Bakr brought all his wealth. He said, I know I can't outdo him. Will you clarify, please clarify, the start should be purification of the heart. However, we should not start with tasawwuf. I thought tasawwuf's goal is purification of the heart. Well, what you're failing to see the intention and the science. What he said was that when you begin, the purpose of learning these things should be to purify your heart. But you have to learn your basic practices like tahara and salah. So you have to learn the fard ain. But your niyyah in learning it should be to get close to your Lord through purifying your heart. But the learning that science is after you've completed the aqidah so that's the difference. Maslow's hierarchy is largely fulfilled in our modern times. We have the basics taken care of for many in developed countries, especially in the West. Many have their social needs met too. Then what keeps people from achieving self-actualization? Well, I mean, I'm not totally convinced of that. I think true security doesn't really exist in the West. I think people have a lot of anxieties about safety and well-being. The food certainly is horrible. They've got really harmful food. A lot of the foods they're eating are poisonous. I mean, processed foods are just poison. They're just consuming poison. So I'm not totally convinced of that. I mean, look how people aren't fat because, you know, they're necessarily eating a lot of food. They're fat because their bodies are being tricked. They're drinking 0-calorie drinks with artificial sweeteners and things like that. The body's confused. You know, you can't take a sweetener. The taste buds send messages to the brain sends messages to the pancreas, and so you're putting things in there. People are really sick. So, but if you look at it outwardly, you know, I mean, part of it is because modern people do not have a metaphysical foundation for their civilization. So they think self-actualization is being psychologically happy, like a house without a roof. I mean, that's their idea of being happy, that it's a psychological state. And so, you know, they can have wealth, fame, everything, and they're miserable and commit suicide. And that happens to a lot of very wealthy and famous people. They're depressed all the time because they don't teach them. First of all, dunya. I mean, these poor people, look, they're all, you know, getting breast implants and facelifts and Botox. I mean, it's sick. The civilization is very, very unhealthy because, first of all, they don't know that you're designed to grow old. And God actually designed it because what He's letting you know is that this is not you. That face that you're seeing in the mirror changing over the years and growing old, that's not really you. You only think it's you, and as long as you think it's you, you're in bad shape. That you is not your personality. The persona, in Latin, persona means mask. Your personality is what you wear, but your soul, that's a whole different reality. And if you don't know that, then you'll think this thing that's falling apart is you. And so you'll do anything to keep it together. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't stay healthy and do exercise and do those things. But this pathetic fear of growing old is a sickness of the heart. It's a disease. And that's why if you don't have a metaphysical path, if you don't have a spiritual pursuit in your life, you're going to be sick. One of my teachers, George Vatholkos, he was a Greek homeopath that I studied with. I had the good fortune of studying with when I was with Dr. Hashim Sidat, who was a brilliant homeopath who now lives in Australia. Anybody, if you have any serious, I don't know if he's still practicing, but he was really an amazing physician. And if you don't believe me, ask Ahmadu from Liverpool, Silasu, Nigerian Ahmadu. What's his last name? Who knows Ahmadu? You know Ahmadu. What's his last name? Silasu? Yeah. I mean, they wanted to have an operation and everything on one of his relatives, and Dr. Sidat, mashallah, treated her, and alhamdulillah, he was a brilliant physician. But George Vatholkos said that atheism is actually a mental illness. He considered it like a psychiatric disease. That if you didn't believe in God, he said, you were diseased. It's interesting that, in the 1970s, homosexuality was diagnosed as an illness. And now they've removed it from the manual of diagnostic manual of diseases. But what's interesting is promiscuity is a sickness. If you're promiscuous, you're not well. But they don't have any way of treating these things, right? They don't have any way of treating them. And so if you don't have a spiritual path that puts these things where you understand what the shahwat are, what the ghadabiyya is, if you don't understand what the irascible soul is, concupiscible soul is, if you don't know these things, if you don't know how to regulate yourself, if you don't know what temperance is, if you don't know what the results of incontinence, moral incontinence is. So you can get to the White House and you can't control yourself when a young intern comes in. Which means you're not a free person. You're not hur, you're abd. The Arabs say, al-abdu hurrun ma tama', al-hurru abdun ma tama', wal-abdu hurrun ma qana'. That a slave is free if they're content, and a free man is a slave as long as he's covetous. So that aspect of true liberalism, of being truly a liberal person, a free person. If you're not free to be generous with your wealth, you're sick. It's called bukhl. Bukhl is a disease. In Arabic, the word for constipation and miserliness is the same. Imsak. Mumsik is a bakhil. So the person that's holding his feces in himself and poisoning himself, right? This is toxic. It's the same with the person that can't give his money away. And money is like manure. You spread it around and good things grow. You hoard it and it's a horrible stench. Comes out of it. So, but these are sicknesses. They don't, and that's why. How do they go on a journey if they don't even know that there's a journey or a destination? If they just think that this is it. Eat, drink, and be merry. This is it. Are you happy yet? How many drugs is it going to take to realize drugs aren't going to make you happy? How much money is it going to take to realize money's not going to make you happy? How many sexual encounters is it going to take until you realize that sexual encounters are not going to make you happy? Human beings are stupid. We're a stupid species. Except for the prophets and the awliya, we are literally stupid people. We're a stupid species. Animals are smarter than us. Animals, if they see something harmful, they run the other way. You'll never get an animal saying, to the other animal, hey, there's a fire over there, let's go check it out. They see fire and they run the other way. And that's why Allah says, inhum kal an'am. They're like animals. In the tafsir, Fakhruddin al-Razi says, because animals flee from harm. Humans actually are attracted by harmful things. And so if you're aqal, if you're not a shahwani, if you're not ruled by your genitals or your stomach, if you're not ruled by your emotions, then you're aqal. And the aqal is the one that knows things are harm. Like my son, when one of my boys he was a little boy, and we were in a store, and this lady was smoking. She took a puff, And she blew it. And I don't know if he'd ever seen smoke, but he was just fascinated by this smoke coming out of her mouth. And she looked at him and she said, "Don't you ever do this." You know, this is the madness of human beings. It's just the madness of human beings. It's amazing that we harm ourselves and we harm others. We cause others a lot of pain and suffering, and it's all because nobody wants to do this work. It's hard work. It's just work, but it can be done. That's the point. This path is a real path. And it's all there. Just like you have a personal trainer. That's all the traditional murshid was. He was a personal trainer. Right? Just so you do the curl up the right way so you don't pull your muscle. You know, he shows you how to do things the right way. That's all. It's like a personal trainer. Now everybody gets personal trainers for their bodies, and they don't think about personal trainers for their souls. It's amazing. But people need help. And we have everything's there, but you have to practice it. You know, everybody's up all night, like till 1 in the morning, and then you don't come for the Fajr, you don't come and do the Quran, read the Wird, things like that. You have to practice. It's just consistent practice. But if you want to just talk about it all the time and not do it ever, it's not going to have any benefit. And people say, "Oh, I've been praying for all these years and I don't feel it." Well, first of all, what are you trying to feel? And that's the first question. What is this thing that you're trying to feel? You want a spiritual experience? If that's why you're worshiping, then you're never going to get the spiritual experience. When it's for the sake of Allah, that's when the experiences will come. But that means emptying your heart of desires. So as long as you have these desires in your heart, you're not doing the work. But the prayer, we should be getting better at our prayer. We practice it every day, but practice makes permanent. It doesn't make perfect unless you're doing the right practice. But if you practice properly, you ask any musician, any athlete, if they learn how to practice properly, they get better as time goes on. And that's the same is true. You can stop thought. You can learn how to stop thought. You can learn how to, Dr. Yang knows how to do these things. The Asian tradition knows these things. These aren't limited to the Muslims. The Asian tradition knows how to meditate, to stop thought. You know, you can go into a hadra in prayer, but it takes practice. Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says, your presence in the prayer is determined by your presence in your wudu. Nobody does wudu properly anymore. They just rush through wudu. Wudu is a practice in and of itself. The Prophet did wudu even when he had wudu. He did wudu when he had wudu. He did wudu as a separate practice. But, you know, you have to go out, you have to sit down, you get a picture, do it properly. First time I saw Marabt al-Hajj do wudu, it changed my whole understanding of wudu. It just floored me. So I realized that it was much deeper than I had realized. He's got the secrets of wudu in there. Wudu has secrets. Anyway, all these practices they're real, and they do have effect on the heart, and they transform the heart. Any other questions? Any? Ala, fabi'ay ala. تفضلي. الله يفرج عن ليبيا إن شاء الله ويفتح عليهم إن شاء الله.
Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام.
So I wholeheartedly agree that unfortunately in our ummah as a whole, we don't necessarily respect the responsibilities, the religious responsibilities, and then by extension the societal and the familial and the work ethic that we have and those kind of responsibilities. But unfortunately, I feel like we neglect to talk about the male half of the ummah, which I don't think, and with all due respect to all the brothers here, but I think in general we tend to overlook the fact that they are heavily neglecting their responsibilities, and that a lot of the responsibilities that women have taken on have been in part because of that. So for example, because of a lack of implementation in proper divorce or a lack of implementation in proper inheritance. And I think that we should probably, maybe we can talk a bit more about how we need to re-educate, yes, the women, but also the men on their responsibilities and on women's rights and on how they should treat women in our religion and in our faith. I think that would be a nice thing, inshallah.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ala. Really. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, Al-Hallaj, his sister, she didn't used to wear a hijab in Baghdad. And somebody asked her about it once. She said, "There's no men in Baghdad. Why do I have to wear a hijab?" She said, "The only man is my brother, and he's my mahram." That's a true story. She said, "The hijab is for rijal." She said, "I don't see any rijal." He said, "Ha'awla awlad." They're all children. Yeah. No, that's not an excuse to take off your hijab. Any other questions? Comments? I don't mind comment. That was more of a comment, and I agree with it. So, mudakhala are fine with me as well. If you have something you want to say. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I heard you say quickly, kind of, money is more important than knowledge.
Right.
Could you comment on that?
That what is?
Money is more important than knowledge.
That was a slip of the tongue if I said that. No, he was saying knowledge is more important than money. Yeah, that was a slip of the tongue. If I said that, zallatul lisan, sabqul lisan they call it. Yeah. So, you ready to give some blood? Any other question or mudakhala?
Sayyidi, you said from the Ihya Ulumuddin that taking ujra in teaching deen is not good. From the Tasawwuf side, but there's one thing I just wanted to get clarification from you. We have this hadith, of which I don't know its daraja. Rasulullah says, خَيْرُ مَا أُخِذَ بِهِ الْأُجْرَةُ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ.
Yeah, and that's what they use as the proof. There's different interpretations of that hadith. It's a sound hadith, but there's different interpretations of that hadith, and that was a big debate in the early period, but it was pretty much resolved. Again, he's dealing with an ideal. Taqashuf was very important to him. He really felt that the ulama, in a sense, he got to a point in his life where it was almost like, to give a modern example of, like Gandhi, where he was saying, if you really want to transform yourself and have an effect on other people, you really have to walk the walk and walk the talk and live your truth. Otherwise, he said, you're just not going to have that impact. So in the next chapter, he mentions about Imam Malik, in fact, it's a very nice letter, but it's a famous letter from one of the, Yahya bin Yazid bin Abdul Malik. He was a Zahid, and he wrote a letter to Imam Malik, and he said, من يحيى بن يزيد بن عبد الملك إلى مالك بن أنس أما بعد فقد بلغني أنك تلبس الدقاق وتأكل الرقاق وتجلس على الوطاء وتجعل على بابك حاجبا وقد جلست مجلس العلم وضربت إليك المطيء وارتحل إليك الناس واتخذوك إماما ورضوا بقولك فاتق الله تعالى يا مالك وعليك بالتواضع كتبت إليك بالنصيحة مني كتابا ما أطلع عليه إلا الله تعالى والسلام فكتب إليه مالك. So he wrote a letter and he said, Malik ibn Anas, this is from Yahya ibn Yazid. It has reached me that you wear fine clothes and you eat refined bread and you sit on carpets and you have a chamberlain at your door, like somebody that, you had somebody that let people in and out, like a butler today. And you sit in the majlis of knowledge and beasts are struck to get to you and people go long distances to take from you, and they have taken you as an imam, and they are content with your words. So have fear of God. Fattaqillah. He's telling Malik ibn Anas, have fear of God, and you should be more humble. So and he said, I have written this as sincere advice. And this letter, no one has seen it except Allah, and peace be upon you. So Malik wrote back to him, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. من مالك ibn Anas ila Yahya ibn Yazid, Salamullah alayk, amma ba'd. It has reached me your letter. And وقع مني موقع النصيحة في الشفقة والأدب أمتعك الله بالتقوى. It's a beautiful response. He's saying that I see in this letter sincerity and general concern and adab. May Allah always delight you with piety. Jazakallah bin nasiha khayra. May Allah reward you for this sincere advice. Look at the humility of the man. He didn't say, how dare you, I'm Malik ibn Anas. وأسأل الله تعالى التوفيق, and I ask Allah to give tawfiq. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أما ما ذكرت لي أني آكل الرقاق. As for what was mentioned that I eat refined bread, they call cornflakes raqa'iq. I thought that was a bad ta'rib, but it's actually probably a good one. وألبس الدقاق, and I wear fine clothes. وأحتجب وأجلس على الوطاء, and I do sit on carpets, and I have a chamberlain. ونحن نفعل ذلك ونستغفر الله. We do that and we ask Allah's forgiveness. وقد قال الله تعالى قل من حرم زينة الله التي أخرج لعباده والطيبات من الرزق. Say, who can prohibit the ornaments of God that He has brought forth for His servants and the good from provision. وَإِنِّي لَأَعْلَمُ أَنَّ تَرْكَ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ مِّنَ الدُّخُولِ فِيهِ. And I am well aware that to avoid these things is better than to enter into them. وَلَا تَدَعْنَا مِنْ كِتَابِكَ فَلَسْنَا نَدَعُكَ مِنْ كِتَابِنَا. And please don't cut us off with your letters, and we won't cut you off from our letters. وَالسَّلَامُ. So he says, فانظر إلى إنصاف مالك إذا اعترف أن ترك ذلك خير من الدخول فيه وأفتى بأنه مباح وقد صدق فيهما جميعا. So look at Malik's, his fairness in admitting that to avoid these things was better than to get into them, but also the fatwa that they were permitted. And they're both right. Both of the men were right. One of the things that, Abu al-Hasan al-Shadri, he removed the muraqa'a. The people of Tasawwuf before Abu al-Hasan al-Shadri, most of them used to wear patched robes. Abu al-Hasan al-Shadri changed that, because in the earlier period, people respected the people for that, because they saw it as humility. Just like the masses, they loved Gandhi in India, but a lot of the rich and the wealthy had utter contempt for him. But when he would walk amongst the masses of Indians, they would come out in throngs. They loved him because he was one of them. He lived like them. And that was his point. He was a very highly educated lawyer. He wasn't from the Brahmin class. He was a third class in the hierarchy of Hinduism. He was from the Vaishya class. So he was actually from the merchant class, not from the warrior class is over them, the Kshatriya and then the Brahman. So he was a third class, but highly educated. He'd been educated in England, but he sewed his own, he wove his own textiles, he made his own clothes. If you, at the museum in India, you can see what he left behind. I mean, it's pretty amazing. He had no property. Absolutely no property. So the poor people would respect him, but the wealthy people had a lot of contempt for him. And that's the way some of these people were, they began to see this as a very low thing. So Abu al-Hasan al-Shadri had his fuqara wear nice clothes. And it became, a path of scholarship, and he encouraged education. It was very important, and those things. So times change, and people have to be realistic. Like I said, he puts forward a lot of ideals in terms of money, it's very important that if that's a goal, if people are trying to get rich through the religion, that it's a very dangerous state to be in. And they should be doing other things if they want to earn dunya. But Allah also takaffara rizqa tarib al-ilm. Allah takes care of the provision of a seeker of knowledge. If you seek knowledge sincerely, you should believe that your provision will come to you. And he has a beautiful letter from Hatim al-Asam, beautiful, one of the great scholars from Balkh. He was from Afghanistan. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal praised him very highly. So he mentions the 8 things he learned from Ma'ruf al-Karkhi, another great Afghan scholar and Zahid. But Hatim was a scholar, and he was more known for his tasawwuf. They call him the deaf one because he was in his majlis. This woman came to ask a question, and she passed wind, and she became very ashamed. And so he said, could you raise your voice in the question because I have some summum in my ear. I can't hear. He was trying to just make her feel less conscientious. And so he got that nickname, Al-Asam. He wasn't actually deaf, but he just did it out of adab to let the person just feel less conscientious. So, anyway. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. What's that? Oh, one more question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to latch on to the question that Sister Ala said. You said you agreed with her, but then that's a bit abrupt of an ending. So do you have any advice to give either to sisters or brothers? Or I know you have sons,
I mean,
of course,
I think I actually feel sorry when I look out there. I feel sorry. I see a lot of really decent, unmarried, pious women that are having a really hard time finding spouses, finding people that are compatible intellectually. We have a lot of highly educated women. I mean, I'll give you an example. In my own country, we have women that are from South Asia that grew up in America, and they're strong women, because they grow up in an environment where women are encouraged to be forthright, and so a lot of men will go back home to find the village girl that's going to do everything he tells her to do because he doesn't want to deal with but what he'll find out is after 10 years, the village girl is going to be just like it just takes a little more time, right, to get there. So, I mean, I really think that's one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ married Khadija. She was an older woman. She was very self-assured. He was never intimidated by strong women. He encouraged their strength. And I think Khadija was what enabled him to feel at ease with strong women because she was such a strong woman, amazing woman. She was an entrepreneur. She was the one that he went to for advice. She took him to Waraqa. She was the one that knew what to do when he was struggling. She was the one that encouraged him and told him, no, this is your Lord's not going to abandon you, and here's the reasons why. So when Aisha comes along, who was a firebrand, Aisha is just amazing, intellectually curious, brilliant, forthright, had no qualms about challenging the Prophet ﷺ about things. I mean, it's very clear from the hadith, and she's amazing. He didn't crush her spirit. He encouraged it. It's very clear. And she ended up leading an army. I mean, that's how self-confident she was. Even though she was wrong in that position, just the fact that she did it is amazing. So I think we need, men that are, willing to we have to recognize the age we're living in. We're living in a very different time, and we have to come to terms with the time, and we have to rise up to the challenges of the time. And part of the challenges is that we need new models for having successful marriages, because the old models worked well in a different world. the world made a lot more sense, was easier to navigate, roles were much more well-defined. That's no longer the case anymore. So these are difficult times for us, but we have to rise up to the challenges, and part of that is, again, it goes back to these basic principles: purification of the self, getting control of the self, setting aside egos, because the nafs al-amara and the nafs is at the root of a lot of these problems. So, we need a lot of education. We need to educate the men and the women, and ourselves. I mean, the educators need to be educated. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاك الله خيرا.